Hey dude, I was originally going to make a response video to your second one about first times, but a first time happened to me. That first time to me was, of course, the car crash that happened. Before we actually talk about the car crash, we're going to talk about a little bit about statistics. So, statistically, according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, is pretty much the obvious that teenagers are way more likely to get into a car crash than that are older. Specifically, it was between 16 and 19-year-olds versus everyone else that's above 20. People that are 16 through 19 years old are 3 times more likely to get into a fatal car crash than those that are 20. It also says that people that are teenagers are more likely to get into a car accident if they are texting, drinking, really sleepy, or with other teenagers. Because teenagers tend to show that they have more responsibility when they're by themselves, but when they're with their peers, they want to show off more. But just for crashes, just within the teenagers themselves, the ones that are 16 and 17 are also 3 times more likely to get into a crash, any type of crash, fatal or non-fatal, in comparison to those that are 18 and 19 years old. The first month of getting the license, they are at the highest risk of either crashing or getting a ticket. And that continues on for about 6 months. Of course, during those 6 months, it starts to kind of level down. Just after those 6 months, they're just way less likely to get into crashes or get any types of tickets. So for me, exactly what happened, I'll show you. Pretend that this piece of paper is the road. And this Uno card, because why not, is the car. Most people, when they drive pretty straight. They're able to go to point A to point B in a relatively straight line. For me, since I'm a pretty new driver, I'm a little wonky. This is obviously not to scale. This is not exactly how I drive. But I do drive with relative swing. When I was driving that day, there's no difference. It was still a very straight line. It was just, as I was driving, at one point, my wheels went off. And I was trying to get back on. Just to, normal correction. Actually ended up happening was, when I was at the very edge, I was able to get here, but the back wheel got caught. That ended up going diagonally. Once I noticed it started happening, of course I was braking. Unfortunately, I believe my wheels locked. So as I was approaching this way, eventually it popped. I was able to pop over. And when it did eventually go over, I was still pretty much sliding this way, right in towards incoming traffic. When I was here, correct my wheels back, and then go straight. That was the plan. But when I saw that other car coming, I took the risk of, as I was correcting it, to get a head-on collision. My plan was, okay, I'm sliding this way, I'm going to continue the energy in order to stop like this. What actually ended up happening was, there was a tree. There was a large gap of no trees, and then trees started. And I was always going to try to be like this. What ended up happening, I went like this. And when I crashed, fortunately, I was, of course, wearing my seatbelt. I was well aware of everything that was happening. I was thinking everything through as I was doing it. Of course, wasn't enough. I braced the wheel with how the car was going in a semicircle, essentially. All the force was put into my right hand, or my right arm technically. It hurt quite a lot, especially since I didn't have pretty much anything else besides my arms and the seatbelt. Yes, although the airbags did deploy, I never touched them. Once I was able to get out and get off, I actually rolled out of the car because I wanted to make sure that my C-spine was still all correct, like I had mentioned in the last video. So when I was on the floor, I would check my CSMVTs just to make sure that everything was fine. My sensory, my motor functions, and all that type of stuff is still intact. I'm still able to know where I am, and I could feel and I could touch. So then I got up, I checked my spine. My spine seemed okay. My arm was quickly recovering. I played around with it a little bit, and I was like, okay, I got full motion of it, it doesn't hurt anymore. It could be that my body's going into shock, but I don't believe so. Because the last time when I broke my collarbone, the shock did come in that it didn't hurt, but I still wasn't able to move it. And at this point, I was still able to, I had complete motion, so I thought I was fine. Ambulance was called. The firemen came. The cops came. Well, one cop, technically. And ironically enough, because that's how things work out, in the last video, I mentioned that there was an accident, right? What I didn't mention was that in that accident, 2 firemen came. And I talked to them because, you know, I was there and I had my assessment and I told them about it. At the time, the fireman asked, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I'm an EMT." It's not technically what I did as a job at that point in time, but I was still a nationally registered EMT. And to my accident, lo and behold, one of those firefighters came to my rescue. My rescue. Since I was a self-extract patient that I was able to get myself out of the car, it wasn't that much of an emergency. When we sat down, we talked, and I was checking myself, ends up that my neck did hurt. And whenever you have any type of neck pain with a traumatic injury like a car crash, especially since I was going about 55 miles per hour at that time, it's very likely that I could have injured my C-spine. But I didn't feel it along my cervical spine. I felt it between my cervical vertebrae 7 and my thoracic vertebrae 1. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I felt it on the muscles a bit lateral to it, to the right side. That's how I felt it, but I wouldn't be too much surprised since, of course, I said that my right arm took the majority of the impact, besides my seatbelt. On to AMA, which is against medical advice, hence the AMA. In our EMT training, that the firefighters were as well, try to convince your patient to not sign an AMA. Both the firefighters knew that I was fully aware of that, and they tried convincing me anyways. And they were successful. I know how pricey an ambulance could be. I actually wrote an essay about it. But during my research, something that I learned was that you're able to pick which hospital you could go to. Since not all insurance companies cover every hospital, it's very good to know which hospital they could send you to. So I decided to go to the hospital nearby, and everything turned out to be okay. So, yeah, a lot of people came to visit. It was really nice. And I stayed at the pastor's house for a while because it was the easiest thing to do, and I was still very sore on my neck and my back because of all the whiplash. So, that's the end of my story. I know it was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but hey, that's how I tell stories, and you already know that. So there we go. 13 minutes, a lot of editing. 13 minutes of editing? So much.